If I told you that one of the most overlooked secrets to both physical health and spiritual clarity was hidden not in a modern science lab, but in the words of a man lying on a couch in Virginia Beach during the Great Depression, would you believe it? Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, shocked countless families when he revealed that fasting, something as simple as abstaining from food, could be one of the most powerful tools for cleansing the body and uplifting the soul. But here is the twist. He did not recommend extreme practices or reckless deprivation. Instead, he gave 5 clear principles rooted in compassion and balance that could transform the way a person approaches fasting forever. Before we dive into them, let me ask you a question. Have you ever tried fasting, and if so, did you do it for your body or for your spirit? Write your answer in the comments, and I will personally mark every comment with a little heart because your perspective matters in this conversation. And while you're there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that this message reaches more souls searching for truth. The image of fasting in our culture often comes with extremes, starving for days, punishing the body, or treating it as a test of willpower. Yet, in one of his most impactful readings in 1932, Cayce gently shifted the perspective. He described fasting not as punishment, but as purification. He said the body, like a temple, sometimes needs to be cleansed so that the spirit can flow freely within it. Imagine hearing that in the middle of the Great Depression, when families were already struggling with hunger. The idea that fasting could be something sacred, not just forced by poverty, was revolutionary. People came to him in Virginia Beach, seeking guidance not only for diseases, but also for clarity in their spiritual lives, and Cayce's words often brought tears to their eyes. The first truth he offered was that fasting is most powerful when done with intention. Without intention, skipping meals is just hunger. But with prayer, with meditation, with a focus on cleansing both mind and body, fasting becomes a bridge between the human and the divine. In sessions that shocked even physicians present, Cayce explained that fasting should be accompanied by pure water, by quiet reflection, and by gratitude for the cleansing process. He said that in those moments, the body begins to reset, not only biologically, but spiritually. The bloodstream is purified, and the mind finds new clarity. This was not mystical exaggeration. It was echoed by people who, after following his advice, described renewed strength and a sense of lightness they had never known before. But Cayce never encouraged extremes. He repeatedly warned against pushing the body beyond its limits. Let moderation be the key, he insisted, during one session that changed the life of an entire family. He told a worried mother that fasting for days without guidance could harm more than heal. Instead, he suggested simple fasts, 1 day a week or a few days with careful preparation, always accompanied by prayer and plenty of water. The wisdom was clear. Fasting should align with health, not fight against it. This principle resonates today even more, as modern science confirms that intermittent fasting can restore balance when done wisely, but leads to danger if abused. Cayce's voice, echoing across decades, still calls us back to balance. The second truth he revealed was about what comes after fasting. Many people break their fast with heavy meals, but Cayce said this is the worst mistake. In his words, the body is like a delicate instrument after cleansing. It should be treated gently. He recommended breaking the fast with citrus fruits, fresh vegetables, or simple broths. Nothing greasy, nothing processed, nothing that shocks the system. In one of his documented sessions in Hopkinsville, he explained that returning to heavy foods too quickly would undo the benefits of fasting and burden the body even more than before. He compared it to sweeping a floor clean and then immediately throwing mud upon it. The metaphor struck those listening in the room and remains just as vivid today. And this is only the beginning, because in just a moment, I will reveal Cayce's third principle of fasting, the one that most surprised even ministers and doctors who consulted him. It was a principle not about the body, but about the soul, and it changed everything we thought fasting was supposed to mean. The third truth Cayce revealed is perhaps the most profound. Fasting is not only about what you take out of the body, but about what you allow into the soul. During several readings, he emphasized that when the stomach is empty, the heart and mind must be filled with prayer, meditation, and higher thoughts. He warned that fasting without a spiritual focus could leave a person vulnerable, not stronger. In one memorable session during the war years, he explained to a soldier's family that fasting should be used as a tool to draw closer to God, to quiet the restless mind, and to open a channel of communication with the higher self. This insight startled even ministers who attended his sessions, because it reframed fasting from a mere discipline of the flesh into a sacred opportunity for communion with the divine. Cayce described the body as a temple that is either cleansed or polluted by what enters it, not just food but thoughts, emotions, and intentions. When people came to him in Virginia Beach seeking healing for their ailments, he often asked them to consider not just what they ate, but what they thought and felt during times of fasting. He said, anger, fear, and resentment could poison the body as much as unhealthy food. But gratitude, faith, and forgiveness could heal it in ways that even physicians could not explain. Imagine sitting in that room, listening to a man in trance calmly deliver truths that pierced deeper than any medical textbook of the time. It was both unsettling and liberating. The fourth principle Cayce highlighted was the rhythm of fasting. He stressed that it was not about extremes but about consistency. In one of his most impactful readings, he explained that setting aside one day each week for fasting, combined with prayer and meditation, was more beneficial than sporadic, punishing fasts. A gentle rhythm allowed the body to expect renewal, like the tides of the sea cleansing the shore again and again. People who followed this pattern often reported not just better digestion and clearer skin, but also sharper focus and a calmer spirit. These testimonies, preserved in the archives of the ARE, became living proof that his counsel was not theoretical, it was transformative. Yet Cayce's words carried a tone of warning as well. He reminded seekers that fasting should always be guided by wisdom and love, not by ego or a desire for control. Do not fast to test the body, he once said, fast to cleanse and renew it. This distinction struck deep because many had believed that enduring hunger was a test of strength or holiness. Cayce flipped the perspective. True holiness was found in balance, not in abuse of the body. He showed that fasting, done with the right rhythm, could be an act of love. Love for the body, love for the soul, and love for the God who gave both. The fifth and final principle Cayce revealed about fasting brings everything together. He taught that fasting should always be followed by service. What does this mean? After cleansing the body and uplifting the spirit, a person is called to turn that renewed energy outward, toward others. In one documented case during the Great Depression, a woman came to him seeking relief from years of illness. Cayce advised her to fast, yes, but he also told her that when she broke her fast, she should use her renewed strength to help those around her. Do for others as you have been renewed, he said gently. This simple phrase carried a radical truth. Fasting is not only for personal gain, but to prepare you to serve, to heal, to uplift. This fifth principle is what makes Cayce's teachings unique. It shifts fasting from self-centered discipline to selfless preparation. It echoes the teachings of Christ himself, who fasted in the desert not just to purify his own body, but to prepare for his mission of love. For Cayce, fasting was never meant to end with the individual. It was meant to ripple out, blessing families, communities, even nations. And those who practiced it with this heart often found not only healing for their own bodies, but unexpected doors opening in their lives, opportunities for service, reconciliation, and peace that they never thought possible. But here is where Cayce's wisdom becomes even more extraordinary. Because in the midst of these fasting principles, he once revealed a vision that connected physical cleansing with the destiny of entire civilizations. In just a moment, I will share with you that vision, one that connected the rhythm of the body with the rhythm of history itself, a truth so bold that even today it continues to stir debate among seekers and scholars. When Cayce spoke of fasting, it was never in isolation. He always tied it to a bigger picture, the way the human body reflects the larger rhythms of the universe. In one trance session during the 1930s, he compared the cycles of fasting to the cycles of the Earth itself. Just as the planet requires seasons of rest and renewal, so too does the human body. This was more than a metaphor. It was a call to live in harmony with creation. He suggested that the same God who designed the tides and the changing of the seasons also designed the body to thrive when given moments of pause and cleansing. For those listening, this was both humbling and empowering. Suddenly, fasting was not just about personal health, it was about aligning with the very laws of the cosmos. During the war years, when fear and anxiety swept across nations, Casey often reminded families that fasting could bring not only physical resilience, but also emotional stability. In a session that touched the hearts of parents who had sons overseas, he explained that setting aside a day for fasting and prayer created a spiritual shield. He didn't mean that it magically protected soldiers from harm, but that it strengthened families at home, giving them clarity, patience, and hope. At a time when the world seemed to be crumbling, this connection between a simple practice and spiritual resilience gave people something tangible to hold on to. It was as if fasting became a quiet act of resistance against despair. But what truly shocked many listeners was Casey's vision that linked fasting with the evolution of civilizations. In one of his trance states, he described how ancient peoples had used fasting not just as a religious act, but as preparation for receiving divine guidance. He spoke of Atlantean priests who fasted before entering the temples of healing, of Hebrew prophets who fasted before receiving visions, and of early Christians who fasted before taking on missions of service. For Casey, fasting was woven into the very fabric of human history, a sacred practice that allowed individuals and entire cultures to tune into higher frequencies of consciousness. Hearing this, some skeptics in the room could not contain their disbelief. Yet others felt a deep stirring, as if a forgotten truth had just been uncovered from the depths of memory. Modern listeners often wonder, how could a man with little formal education, lying on a couch in Virginia Beach, speak with such confidence about both the body and the destiny of civilizations? The answer lies in the way Casey described his gift. He said he was reading from a universal source, what he called the Akashic Records, the memory of all souls and all time. When he spoke of fasting, he was not merely giving dietary advice, he was unveiling a principle etched into the very design of human existence. That is why his words carried such weight. They were not opinions, but revelations, and families who followed them often found results they could not deny. Bodies healed, minds renewed, spirits uplifted. One story from the archives tells of a man in New York who had battled chronic digestive issues for years. Doctors gave him medicines that brought little relief. Desperate, he traveled to Virginia Beach and asked Casey for help. In trance, Casey told him to adopt a rhythm of weekly fasting, combined with prayer and specific dietary adjustments. The man followed the guidance, and within months his health improved dramatically. But what touched him even more was the change in his mind. He said he felt calmer, more centered, more at peace. For him, fasting was not just about healing his stomach, but about healing his life. Stories like this spread quietly, whispered from one family to another, until people across the country began to see fasting not as a hardship, but as a sacred gift. Yet Casey never wanted people to idolize the practice itself. He warned that fasting without humility and service could become empty. "It is not the fast that saves you," he said in one session, "but what you do with the clarity it brings." Those words still echo today, reminding us that fasting is not the destination, but the doorway. It is what happens after, the choices you make, the love you give, the service you render, that truly matters. This is why his fifth principle remains so crucial. Fasting must lead to service. It is in serving others that the energy purified within us flows outward, completing the circle of renewal. And so when we step back and look at Casey's 5 principles together, they form a tapestry. Fasting with intention, breaking the fast gently, aligning body and spirit, creating rhythm, and serving others. It is a tapestry woven not only through his words, but through the lived experiences of countless people who trusted his guidance. But here's the question for you. If Casey was right that fasting can align us with divine rhythms, then what might happen if entire communities embraced it, not just individuals? Could fasting, as he suggested, ripple outward to bring healing to societies, even to nations? In a moment I will share how Casey hinted at this very possibility, and why his vision of fasting may be more relevant now than ever before. Casey often insisted that fasting was not just a private matter, it could shape the destiny of families, communities, even nations. In a session recorded during the turbulence of the 1940s, he told a group in Virginia Beach that when groups of people fasted together with prayer and intention, their collective energy created waves that reached far beyond what the eye could see. He described this energy as a light made brighter by many candles, suggesting that when individuals aligned their bodies and spirits through fasting, they contributed to a larger field of healing that could influence the world itself. Imagine being in that room in the shadow of war, hearing that a simple act like fasting could ripple across oceans, touching soldiers, leaders, and nations in ways unseen but deeply felt. For many, it was a lifeline of hope in a time of darkness. This collective dimension of fasting was not theoretical. During the Great Depression, Casey advised families who were struggling not only with poverty but with despair to set aside days for fasting and prayer. He explained that even though they lacked food by circumstance, choosing to fast intentionally transformed hardship into holiness. He told them that their act of conscious fasting turned scarcity into a spiritual offering, lifting them out of fear and into faith. One family later wrote that after following his guidance, their home was filled with unexpected peace, even as financial struggles continued. They described it as if a weight had been lifted, not from their wallets, but from their hearts. These stories became part of the living testimony of Casey's legacy, that fasting was never merely about food, but about transforming the energy of life itself. The idea that fasting could impact nations may sound impossible to modern ears, yet Casey spoke about it in terms of alignment. He said that when individuals purify their bodies and open their spirits, they are better equipped to act with clarity, compassion, and justice. Multiply that by thousands, and entire communities could begin to shift. As the body is renewed, he once said, so too can a people be renewed. This statement has echoed for decades through the halls of the ARE, reminding seekers that the healing of the world begins with the healing of the individual, and fasting is one path toward that renewal. But Casey was always practical. He grounded even his most mystical statements in simple actions. He didn't tell people to fast for weeks on end, nor did he demand ascetic practices. Instead, he encouraged ordinary men and women, farmers in Kentucky, businessmen in New York, mothers in Ohio, to embrace small, steady rhythms of fasting combined with prayer. It was in the ordinary consistency that the extraordinary emerged. He believed that God met people not in their extremes, but in their humble devotion, and that remains one of the most comforting truths for us today. Looking back now, nearly a century after those words were spoken, the relevance is striking. Modern science affirms what Casey revealed. Fasting, when done properly, cleanses the body, sharpens the mind, and renews the spirit. Yet science alone cannot explain the deeper transformation, that sense of connection to something greater, the awareness that we are more than flesh and blood. That is where Casey's insights shine. He bridged the gap between body and spirit, showing that one cannot be healed without the other. His 5 principles of fasting are not relics of the past. They are invitations to live more fully in the present. So if you've ever wondered whether fasting could be more than a health trend, Casey's teachings answer with a resounding yes. They remind us that fasting, done with intention, humility, and service, is not deprivation. It is preparation. It is preparing the body for clarity, the mind for peace, and the soul for service. And when practiced together, it prepares communities for renewal. The question that remains is simple yet profound. What could change in your own life, in your family, or even in your community, if you embraced fasting not as punishment, but as a sacred rhythm? Before we close, let me invite you once again. If this message touched you, leave a comment below telling us your experience with fasting or your thoughts on what Casey revealed. I will mark each comment with a heart, because your voice is part of this shared journey. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel so that more seekers can join us. Together, we can keep alive the wisdom that still has the power to transform lives today. As we bring all of this together, let us remember the 5 principles that Edgar Cayce revealed about fasting. First, fasting must begin with intention. Without intention, it is only hunger. With intention, it becomes purification and alignment with the divine. Second, the way we break the fast matters. Gentle foods like citrus fruits, vegetables, or simple broths respect the body and allow it to continue its renewal. Third, fasting is a spiritual act as much as a physical one. When the body is emptied, the soul must be filled with prayer, gratitude, and higher thoughts. Fourth, rhythm is essential. Fasting consistently, even just one day a week, creates a sacred pattern that builds health and clarity over time. And fifth, fasting must lead to service. The renewed energy we gain is meant to be poured into helping others, completing the cycle of love and renewal. These 5 truths, spoken by a man who had no medical degree, no formal theological training, but who spoke from a deeper source, have stood the test of time. Families in the Great Depression found hope in them. Soldiers' parents during the war found strength in them. And today, in a world filled with noise, anxiety, and endless distractions, these principles shine like a compass, pointing us back to balance. Fasting, as Cayce described it, is not outdated, it is timeless. Think about this. Every time you fast with prayerful intention, you are joining a lineage that stretches back through the prophets, through Christ in the desert, through ancient priests who prepared themselves for sacred service. You are aligning yourself with rhythms greater than your own. You are saying yes to being a vessel of clarity, peace, and renewal. And in a world so desperately in need of healing, that choice matters more than ever. Cayce's legacy lives on not just in the archives of the ARE in Virginia Beach, but in every life that puts his wisdom into practice. When we fast with intention, when we break the fast gently, when we fill our minds with prayer, when we keep the rhythm, and when we serve others, we are living the wisdom he channeled. We are proving that truth does not die, it endures through those who embody it. And that is the invitation for you today. So now the question is yours. Will you see fasting as deprivation, or will you see it as preparation? Will you use it merely as a health trend, or will you embrace it as a sacred rhythm that connects body, mind, and soul? The choice is yours, and the potential is extraordinary. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Tell us what fasting means to you, or if you've ever tried it with spiritual intention. I will mark each comment with a heart, because your experiences and reflections matter here. And please, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, so that together we can continue spreading the wisdom of Edgar Cayce to all who are seeking truth in these times. The world is hungry not just for food, but for meaning, for balance, for connection to the divine. And perhaps through something as simple yet profound as fasting, we can begin to satisfy that hunger. This is not the end of the story, it is only the beginning. Because once you understand the wisdom behind fasting, you begin to wonder, what other everyday practices hold hidden spiritual power? What else did Cayce reveal that can transform the way we live, think, and serve? Stay with us, because the journey into his teachings is far from over. When we step back and look at the arc of Cayce's teachings, one thing becomes clear. He was never offering quick fixes or superficial advice. Every reading was an invitation to live in deeper harmony with the body, with the spirit, and with God. Fasting was simply one doorway into that harmony, but it carried lessons that extend far beyond diet. It taught moderation, humility, patience, and service, qualities the modern world often forgets. Imagine how different our culture would be if, instead of chasing constant consumption, we embraced moments of intentional pause, silence, and renewal. Cayce believed that such a shift could change not only individual lives, but the direction of society itself. In the archives of the RE, preserved in Virginia Beach, countless testimonies echo this truth. Families who once came to him in despair later wrote letters describing how fasting with intention transformed their homes. Mothers spoke of children who became calmer and healthier. Fathers wrote about finding new strength after years of fatigue. Ministers described how prayer and fasting brought clarity to their sermons. These stories were not sensational headlines, they were quiet, consistent transformations that spread like ripples through communities. It was in these ordinary miracles that Cayce's extraordinary wisdom proved itself, and yet he always brought people back to balance. In one session during the post-war years, a man asked whether fasting for longer periods would bring greater spiritual power. Casey's answer was strikingly simple. The power comes not from the length of the fast, but from the spirit in which it is done. That statement dismantled the belief that extreme practices lead to greater holiness. Instead, it affirmed that God honors sincerity over severity, love over self-punishment. This perspective freed countless seekers from the trap of spiritual pride, reminding them that true transformation begins in humility. Today, when fasting is often discussed in the context of diets, weight loss, or health trends, Casey's words cut through the noise. He reminds us that fasting is sacred when it connects us to something greater than ourselves. Science can explain the biological benefits: detoxification, improved metabolism, cellular repair. But Casey points to the deeper truth, that fasting clears the channels for divine energy to flow. This is why so many people who followed his counsel reported not just physical healing but emotional peace, mental clarity, and spiritual renewal. They didn't just feel lighter in body, they felt lighter in soul. There is also a lesson here about how wisdom endures. Casey spoke these words nearly a century ago, in a time without modern research on intermittent fasting, without the internet to spread his readings, without the global wellness industry. And yet, his insights align with what science confirms today, while also going beyond it, offering spiritual dimensions that no laboratory can measure. This is why his voice continues to matter, not as a relic of the past, but as a guidepost for the present and future. Perhaps the greatest challenge is not believing Casey's words, but living them. It is easy to hear about fasting and nod in agreement. It is harder to set aside the time, to quiet the noise, to let go of constant consumption. Yet, those who take the step often find that it is not nearly as difficult as they feared, and that the rewards far exceed the effort. One day of fasting, guided by prayer and intention, can open doors of clarity that no amount of striving could achieve. That is the paradox Casey unveiled. By emptying ourselves, we become full. So the invitation remains as alive today as it was in the 1930s and 1940s. Will you take it? Will you allow fasting to become not just a health practice, but a sacred rhythm? Will you use it not to punish yourself, but to prepare yourself for peace, for clarity, for service? These are the questions that linger, and only you can answer them. To understand the depth of Casey's wisdom on fasting, we must look beyond the individual body and even beyond the historical moment in which he lived. Casey suggested that fasting was not just a practice for one person or one faith, but a universal law woven into the soul's relationship with God. He pointed out how prophets of the Old Testament fasted before receiving visions, how Christ himself fasted for 40 days before beginning his ministry, and how early Christian communities fasted before great decisions. He saw these not as coincidences, but as evidence that fasting is a timeless key to unlocking higher states of awareness. For Casey, fasting was never about deprivation. It was about preparation. It was the preparation of the vessel so that divine light could shine more clearly through it. This universal perspective also explains why people from such different walks of life found resonance in his words. Farmers in Kentucky, business leaders in New York, and mothers in small towns all received the same encouragement: to cleanse not only their bodies, but their spirits through fasting. Some of them came skeptical, expecting medical prescriptions or complicated regimens. Instead, they heard simple words: drink water, rest the body, pray, and keep your thoughts pure. These instructions often seemed too simple at first, but when practiced, they brought results that couldn't be denied. Many testified not only to physical improvements, but to a renewed sense of purpose in their daily lives. There is something deeply moving in the way Casey connected the most ordinary act, abstaining from food, with the most extraordinary reality: union with the divine. It reminds us that spirituality is not locked away in temples or hidden in mysteries. It is accessible in the simple rhythms of life. Fasting became a way to pause, to realign, to remember who we are and why we are here. For people who felt lost in the chaos of the Great Depression or the fear of war, that reminder was more than comforting. It was life-saving. Casey also warned that fasting could not be separated from one's inner state. He explained that if someone fasted while harboring anger, resentment, or fear, the benefits would be diminished. In contrast, if they fasted with gratitude, humility, and prayer, the benefits multiplied. This teaching is as practical today as it was then. It is not enough to simply abstain from food. One must also abstain from toxic thoughts and emotions during the fast. The body and the spirit are intertwined, and fasting purifies both when practiced with love and reverence. Modern seekers sometimes struggle with this idea. They want quick results, measurable outcomes, instant transformations. But Cayce's counsel pushes against that impatience. He urged people to see fasting as part of a lifelong rhythm, not a one-time experiment. Just as the earth has seasons, just as the tides rise and fall, so too should the human being embrace cycles of cleansing and renewal. This perspective turns fasting into a sustainable practice, not a passing trend. It becomes a rhythm that shapes character, builds resilience, and opens the heart to service. As we near the close of these reflections, think about how Cayce's 5 principles fit into your own life. They are not rules to be followed rigidly, but invitations to walk a path of balance, intention, gentle breaking of the fast, spiritual focus, rhythm, and service. These are guideposts. Each one calls us not just to abstain from food, but to embrace a way of being that is lighter, freer, and more attuned to the divine. The beauty of this path is that it requires no wealth, no special status, no external authority. Anyone, anywhere, can step into it. And in doing so, they step into a legacy of wisdom that continues to heal and inspire nearly a century after it was first spoken. But there is still one more truth that Cayce left us with, one that ties fasting to the very purpose of life itself. And in our final moments together, we will uncover that truth, so that you can carry it not only as knowledge, but as a lived experience. Cayce often reminded seekers that every physical practice carried a spiritual parallel, and fasting was no exception. At its core, he said, fasting was not about food at all, it was about the soul learning to let go. Just as the body lets go of meals for a time, the soul is invited to let go of fear, pride, resentment, and all that weighs it down. In one of his most memorable sessions, he explained that the greatest purpose of fasting was to make room for God. Those 4 words, make room for God, summarize the essence of everything he taught. The body becomes lighter, the mind becomes clearer, and the soul becomes more open to divine presence. That is the hidden treasure behind the discipline. When viewed this way, fasting is no longer just a practice of health or even of spiritual growth. It becomes a metaphor for life itself. Life constantly asks us to let go of what no longer serves us so that something greater can enter. Every ending is a kind of fast. Every new beginning is a kind of feast. Cayce's wisdom about fasting mirrors the eternal rhythm of surrender and renewal that shapes our journey as souls. And perhaps that is why his words continue to resonate, because they do not just tell us how to fast, they tell us how to live. As we close this exploration of Cayce's 5 principles of fasting, let us hold on to the truth that fasting is not deprivation, but preparation. It prepares us for clarity, for peace, for service, and ultimately for deeper connection with the divine. Whether you choose to fast 1 day a week or a few days in a season, the invitation is the same: to step into a rhythm of renewal that aligns your body, mind, and soul with the greater order of creation. In a world full of chaos and noise, that rhythm can be a sanctuary. Now it is your turn. What do you think about Cayce's wisdom on fasting? Have you ever experienced fasting in a way that felt spiritual, not just physical? Share your story in the comments below. I will personally mark every comment with a heart, because your journey matters here. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that together we can continue to spread Cayce's timeless teachings to all who are searching for truth. Each click, each share, each comment helps this message reach another soul in need of light. Remember, the world is not only hungry for food, it is hungry for wisdom, for healing, for connection with God. And perhaps by embracing something as simple and sacred as fasting, you can become part of the answer to that hunger. As Cayce said, make room for God. That is the essence of fasting, and that is the invitation for your life. What if everything you've been told about aging is incomplete? What if the real secret to staying young isn't found in expensive creams, complicated diets, or the latest medical breakthrough, but in something far more profound that Edgar Cayce revealed during his trance readings nearly a century ago? The truth is, Cayce's approach to vitality and youthfulness was so radically different from conventional thinking that even today most people have never heard about it. And what he discovered might completely transform how you think about the aging process. If you're ready to explore wisdom that challenges everything you thought you knew about staying young, hit that like button and subscribe right now so you never miss these profound teachings. Drop a comment sharing what staying young means to you, and I'll mark every single one with a heart because your journey toward vitality matters. Now let's dive into what Edgar Cayce really taught about the forgotten key to youthfulness. Edgar Cayce gave over 14,000 documented readings during his lifetime, and woven throughout these sessions was a consistent message about human vitality that contradicted the medical understanding of his era. While doctors focused exclusively on the physical body, Cayce insisted that true youthfulness required harmony between three inseparable aspects of our being: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. He called this the holistic approach, though that term wouldn't become popular until decades after his death. In his readings on health and rejuvenation, Cayce made a startling claim that puzzled many people at the time. He said that the body renews itself completely at the cellular level, and that the primary factor determining whether we age gracefully or deteriorate rapidly isn't genetics or luck. It's something far more within our control. According to Cayce, the quality of our thoughts, the state of our emotions, and our spiritual alignment directly influence how our cells regenerate. Think about that for a moment. Cayce was telling people in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s that their mental and spiritual states were actually controlling their physical aging process. This was revolutionary. Medicine at that time treated the body like a machine that simply wore out over time. But Cayce saw something entirely different. He saw the human body as a living temple constantly rebuilding itself, and the blueprints for that rebuilding came from our consciousness itself. So what was the forgotten key? What did Cayce identify as the master principle for staying young? The answer centers on one word that appears repeatedly throughout his readings on vitality: circulation. But Cayce wasn't just talking about blood circulation, though he emphasized that too. He was talking about the circulation of life force itself through every level of our being. Cayce taught that life force, what he sometimes called the creative energy or the divine spark, must flow freely through our physical, mental, and spiritual bodies. When that flow becomes blocked or stagnant at any level, aging accelerates. When it circulates freely, the body maintains its natural vitality regardless of chronological age. This circulation principle became the foundation of everything else he taught about youthfulness. On the physical level, Cayce gave specific guidance that was remarkably ahead of his time. He emphasized the importance of spinal health, explaining that the spine is the central pathway through which life force flows into the body's various systems. He frequently recommended osteopathic adjustments and spinal manipulations to keep this pathway clear. The nervous system, according to Cayce, acts as the bridge between spiritual energy and physical manifestation. He also stressed the critical importance of eliminations. Cayce explained that toxins and waste materials that aren't properly eliminated from the body create a burden that accelerates the aging process. He often recommended colonics, hydrotherapy, and dietary approaches that supported the body's natural detoxification systems. In reading after reading, he emphasized that internal cleanliness was essential for maintaining youthfulness. The diet recommendations Cayce gave focused on alkalinity and freshness. He consistently advised people to eat more vegetables than any other food group, particularly leafy greens. He warned against too many fried foods, too much red meat, and excessive starches and sugars. He emphasized eating foods that were as close to their natural state as possible. But here's what made Cayce's dietary guidance unique. He didn't present it as a rigid system. He explained that the attitude with which you eat matters almost as much as what you eat. This brings us to the mental aspect of Cayce's youth formula, and this is where his teachings become truly distinctive. Cayce insisted that our mental patterns and emotional states create the environment in which our cells either thrive or deteriorate. He taught that chronic worry, persistent fear, ongoing resentment, and harbored anger literally poison the body's systems and accelerate aging. In numerous readings, Cayce explained that negative mental states disrupt the glandular system, particularly the endocrine glands that regulate everything from metabolism to cellular regeneration. When someone lives in a constant state of stress, anxiety, or bitterness, their endocrine system becomes imbalanced, and this imbalance manifests as premature aging. The body simply cannot maintain youthfulness when the mind is trapped in destructive patterns. But Cayce didn't just identify the problem. He provided the solution, and it was deceptively simple: changing our mental habits through deliberate spiritual practice. He emphasized the power of constructive thinking, encouraging people to consciously redirect their thoughts away from negativity and toward ideals that uplifted and inspired them. One practice Cayce recommended repeatedly was the discipline of setting a spiritual ideal. He taught that each person should identify their highest spiritual purpose or value, then align their thoughts and actions with that ideal daily. This practice, he explained, creates coherence between the spiritual, mental, and physical aspects of our being, and that coherence is what allows life force to circulate freely. Meditation was another cornerstone of Cayce's approach to maintaining vitality. He didn't describe meditation as merely a relaxation technique or stress management tool. According to Cayce, meditation is the practice of attuning ourselves to the divine source of all life. During meditation, we open pathways for spiritual energy to flow into our physical bodies, literally recharging our cellular batteries with life force. Cayce gave specific guidance on meditation practice throughout his readings. He emphasized the importance of spinal alignment during meditation, explaining that the spine serves as the antenna through which we receive spiritual energy. He talked about the awakening of spiritual centers within the body, which correspond to the endocrine glands. When these centers are awakened and balanced through meditation, the entire body experiences rejuvenation. But here's where Cayce's teaching reaches its deepest level. He explained that the ultimate key to staying young isn't found in any technique or practice alone. The real secret lies in understanding our true nature as spiritual beings. According to Cayce, we age because we forget who we really are. We identify with the physical body and believe we are limited, mortal, and subject to decay. But Cayce insisted this is an illusion. In his readings on the nature of consciousness and existence, Cayce taught that we are eternal spiritual beings temporarily inhabiting physical bodies. The soul itself never ages. It is the source of perpetual life and vitality. When we reconnect with our spiritual essence through daily practice, prayer, and meditation, we tap into a wellspring of renewable energy that can keep the physical body vibrant far longer than most people imagine possible. Cayce also emphasized the transformative power of service to others. He taught that when we dedicate our lives to being a channel of healing, love, and assistance for others, we keep the life force circulating through us. Selfishness and self-centeredness, according to Cayce, cause stagnation, while selfless service keeps us youthful and vibrant. This wasn't just spiritual philosophy. Cayce believed it had direct physical effects on our vitality. One of the most profound principles Cayce shared about youthfulness was the importance of purpose. He explained that people who maintain a clear sense of purpose and meaning in their lives tend to stay younger longer. When someone has a reason to get up each morning, a contribution to make, a mission to fulfill, their body responds by maintaining its vitality. Conversely, when people retire from meaningful activity and lose their sense of purpose, aging often accelerates dramatically. The concept of attitudes was central to Cayce's understanding of aging. He frequently told people that their attitudes toward life, toward others, and toward themselves were more important than almost any other factor in determining how they aged. An attitude of gratitude, joy, and optimism creates a body chemistry that supports youthfulness. An attitude of complaint, cynicism, and negativity creates a body chemistry that promotes deterioration. Cayce also addressed the role of the will in maintaining vitality. He taught that we have far more control over our aging process than we typically believe. Through the consistent application of our will, aligned with spiritual ideals, we can direct the body's regenerative processes. This wasn't wishful thinking or positive affirmations alone. Cayce was describing a genuine power of consciousness to influence physical reality. In his readings on longevity and vitality, Cayce made it clear that staying young isn't about fighting against a natural process. It's about aligning with the natural flow of life force that wants to sustain and renew us. The body is designed to regenerate. Every cell contains intelligence and healing power, but we block that natural regeneration through our mental patterns, emotional habits, and spiritual disconnection. The practical application of Cayce's teachings on youthfulness comes down to daily choices and consistent practices, starting each day with prayer or meditation to attune to the divine source, maintaining spinal health through movement, stretching, or therapeutic work, eating foods that support alkalinity and vitality, monitoring our thoughts and redirecting them toward constructive patterns, practicing forgiveness to release the emotional toxins that age us prematurely, engaging in meaningful service that keeps life force flowing through us. But perhaps the most important element of Cayce's approach was his insistence on patience and persistence. He frequently reminded people that transformation doesn't happen overnight. The body took years to reach its current state, and it requires consistent effort over time to restore optimal vitality. Yet he also emphasized that it's never too late to begin. The body's regenerative capacity is remarkable, and when we start providing it with the right conditions, physically, mentally, and spiritually, it responds with renewed vigor. Cayce's vision of youthfulness wasn't about looking like a teenager when you're 70. It was about maintaining the vitality, flexibility, and joy of someone who is fully alive at any age. He taught that chronological age and biological age are not the same thing, and that through conscious application of spiritual principles, we can slow and even reverse many aspects of the aging process. What makes Cayce's approach so powerful is that it addresses aging at its root cause, rather than just treating symptoms. Modern approaches focus on external interventions like surgery, medications, and cosmetic procedures. Cayce taught that real youthfulness radiates from within, from the quality of our consciousness and the flow of spiritual energy through our being. The forgotten key to staying young that Edgar Cayce revealed isn't a secret technique or hidden knowledge. It's the recognition that we are spiritual beings with the power to influence our physical reality through consciousness. It's the understanding that body, mind, and spirit are one integrated system, and that vitality depends on harmony among all three. It's the practice of daily attunement to the divine source of life that renews us from the inside out. As you reflect on these teachings, consider this. What would your life look like if you fully embraced Cayce's holistic approach to youthfulness? What if you committed to daily meditation, conscious eating, constructive thinking, and purposeful service? What if you truly believed that your body is designed to regenerate and that you have the power to support that regeneration through your choices? The wisdom Edgar Cayce shared during his readings came from a source beyond his conscious mind. He called it the universal consciousness, the Akashic records, the divine intelligence that knows all things. And according to that source, staying young isn't about defying nature. It's about aligning with the deepest truth of our nature as eternal spiritual beings, temporarily expressing through physical form. This perspective transforms everything. Aging is no longer an enemy to fight or a fate to accept. It becomes a feedback mechanism showing us where we're out of alignment with our spiritual essence. Every sign of premature aging, every loss of vitality, becomes an invitation to look deeper, to reconnect with Source, to restore the natural circulation of life force that wants to keep us vibrant and alive. If these teachings resonate with your soul, if you feel called to explore this path of holistic vitality, I invite you to take action right now. Hit that like button to let me know this wisdom touched you. Subscribe to this channel so you can continue discovering Edgar Cayce's profound insights on health, consciousness, and spiritual growth. Drop a comment below sharing your own experiences with vitality and aging, or tell me which aspect of Cayce's teaching you want to apply first in your own life. I promise to mark every comment with a heart, because your journey matters, and together we're rediscovering wisdom that can transform how we age. The forgotten key to staying young that Edgar Cayce revealed is available to every person right now. It doesn't require expensive treatments or special access. It requires commitment to a daily practice of spiritual attunement, mental discipline, and physical care. It requires seeing yourself not as a body that's slowly dying, but as a spiritual being expressing life through your physical form. It requires trusting that the same intelligence that created your body knows exactly how to renew it when you provide the right conditions. EDGAR CAYCE'S legacy lives on through the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, where his readings are preserved and studied. Thousands of people have applied his principles and experienced remarkable transformations in their vitality and well-being. His teachings continue to inspire new generations to look beyond conventional approaches and explore the deeper dimensions of health and consciousness. The question now is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you dismiss it as too simple or too strange, or will you be bold enough to test these principles in your own life and discover whether they hold the power Cayce claimed they did? There's something else Cayce revealed about youthfulness that deserves deeper exploration, something that connects directly to how we experience time itself. In several of his readings, Cayce explained that our perception of aging is intimately linked to our relationship with the present moment. He taught that people who live predominantly in regret about the past or anxiety about the future literally accelerate their aging process. The body responds to these mental time travels as if they were actual stressful events happening right now. According to Cayce, one of the most powerful practices for maintaining youthfulness is learning to be fully present in each moment. When we bring our complete attention to the now, we stop the drain of vital energy that occurs when our consciousness is fragmented across time. He explained that the eternal now is where the divine source meets us, and it's in this present moment that we access the regenerative power of spirit. This teaching about presence connects beautifully with what Cayce said about joy and laughter. He frequently emphasized that joy is not just an emotion, but a healing frequency that revitalizes the entire body. In his readings, he often recommended that people cultivate more laughter, play, and lightheartedness in their daily lives. He wasn't suggesting we ignore life's challenges or pretend everything is perfect. Rather, he was pointing to a deeper joy that comes from knowing our true spiritual nature, a joy that remains accessible even during difficult times. Cayce also spoke extensively about the role of creativity in maintaining vitality. He taught that every human being is inherently creative because we're made in the image of the Creator. When we engage in creative expression, whether through art, music, writing, gardening, cooking, or any form that allows our inner spirit to manifest outwardly, we activate regenerative forces within our being. Creativity keeps the life force moving, prevents stagnation, and maintains that youthful spark of enthusiasm for living. The breath was another element Cayce identified as crucial for youthfulness, though this aspect of his teaching is often overlooked. He explained that proper breathing, particularly deep breathing that fully engages the diaphragm, helps oxygenate the blood and stimulate the flow of life force through the body. In some readings, he recommended specific breathing exercises to be practiced during meditation or throughout the day, as a way of consciously directing energy and maintaining vitality. Cayce's understanding of the relationship between youthfulness and relationships is particularly insightful. He taught that the quality of our connections with others directly impacts our vitality. Relationships built on genuine love, mutual respect, and authentic communication nourish us at the deepest levels. Conversely, toxic relationships drain our life force and contribute to premature aging. He encouraged people to evaluate their relationships honestly and to have the courage to transform or release connections that consistently depleted their energy. One aspect of Cayce's teaching that often surprises people is his emphasis on music and vibration. He explained that everything in creation vibrates at specific frequencies, including our bodies. Music, particularly harmonious and uplifting music, can help attune our cellular vibration to higher frequencies that support regeneration and youthfulness. He sometimes recommended specific pieces of music or types of sound to support healing and vitality. The power of expectation was another key principle in Cayce's approach to staying young. He taught that what we expect tends to manifest in our experience. If we expect to deteriorate with age, If we believe aging inevitably means decline and disease, we unconsciously program our bodies to fulfill those expectations. But if we hold the expectation that we can remain vital, flexible, and healthy throughout our years, we create an entirely different possibility. This isn't naive positive thinking. It's a recognition of consciousness's creative power. Cayce also addressed the importance of what he called attunement to natural rhythms. He taught that human beings are designed to live in harmony with natural cycles, the cycle of day and night, the changing seasons, the rhythms of rest and activity. Modern life often disconnects us from these natural patterns, and that disconnection takes a toll on our vitality. Spending time in nature, respecting our need for rest, and honoring the seasons of our own life all contribute to maintaining youthfulness. Perhaps one of the most profound elements of Cayce's teaching on staying young relates to his understanding of karma and soul growth. He explained that we're here on earth to learn specific lessons and to grow spiritually. When we resist those lessons, when we fight against the growth opportunities that life presents, we create inner tension that manifests as aging and disease. But when we embrace our life lessons with grace and willingness to grow, we align with the soul's purpose, and that alignment brings vitality. The practice of gratitude emerged repeatedly in Cayce's readings as a powerful key to youthfulness. He taught that gratitude isn't just good manners or positive thinking. It's a fundamental spiritual practice that shifts our entire energetic state. When we cultivate genuine gratitude for our life, our body, our experiences, and even our challenges, we create an inner environment where healing and regeneration flourish naturally. Cayce's vision of staying young ultimately points us toward a complete transformation in how we understand ourselves and our relationship with the aging process. He invites us to see that we're not victims of time, genetics, or circumstance. We're co-creators of our experience, endowed with remarkable power to influence our physical reality through our consciousness. The body we inhabit is not a machine that inevitably breaks down. It's a living temple, constantly responsive to the quality of our thoughts, emotions, and spiritual alignment. The forgotten key to staying young is now in your hands. It's a key that opens not just to physical vitality, but to a completely new way of being in the world, a way that recognizes your divine nature, honors the wisdom of your body, and celebrates the eternal spirit that animates your form. The choice of what to do with this key and the life it can unlock is yours alone. What if the secret to slowing down aging was never hidden in expensive treatments or miracle products, but in a spiritual practice that humanity has forgotten? Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, revealed in his readings that the human body has the ability to renew itself, cell by cell, if we align our mind, spirit, and daily habits with divine principles. He explained that aging is not only a biological process, but the result of disconnection from God, unhealthy emotions, and the neglect of practices that once kept the body and soul in harmony. This is not fantasy, but the actual guidance Cayce gave to those who asked him how to preserve their vitality. In this video, you will rediscover the forgotten practice that Cayce described, a path that challenges modern beliefs and invites you to see aging through a new spiritual lens. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to hear could change the way you live today. And before we begin, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe it is possible to slow down aging through spiritual practices? Leave your comment below. I will read and mark each one with a heart. Aging has always been one of humanity's greatest fears. We try to fight it with creams, surgeries, and modern treatments. But what if the real solution was never outside but within us? Edgar Cayce explained that the body is designed to renew itself. He revealed that every cell of our body can be influenced by the mind and spirit. He taught that negative emotions such as resentment, fear, and anger speed up aging because they create blockages in the flow of energy. On the other hand, faith, hope, joy, and love strengthen the body's natural ability to repair itself. Cayce often said that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and that the state of our soul is directly reflected in our health and appearance. When disconnected from God, the body becomes heavy, tired, and aged. When connected to higher principles, vitality increases and time seems to lose its power. This is why Cayce emphasized that spiritual practices were not just about religion, but also about real physical consequences that science is still trying to understand today. He described aging as a process of imbalance, not something inevitable in the way most people think, but a consequence of choices, habits, and most of all, the way we handle our inner world. According to Cayce, the body has cycles of renewal, and approximately every 7 years, our cells completely regenerate. This means that in theory, we are not the same person we were a decade ago, at least not physically. Yet many people continue to feel older, weaker, and trapped in the limitations of time. Why? Cayce explained that when we carry unresolved emotions, live without purpose, and ignore spiritual alignment, our body reproduces these same imbalances in each new cycle of renewal. Instead of becoming younger, we reinforce the marks of aging. That is why he insisted that rejuvenation is possible if we change how we think, what we believe, and how we relate to God. It is not a fantasy, it is a forgotten practice that begins in the silence of the mind and flows into the cells. Cayce also emphasized circulation as a key factor. He said that the life force, or what he called the creative energies of the body, needs to flow freely. When the circulation of blood, lymph, and even the nervous system is blocked by stress, poor posture, or lack of movement, the body begins to decay faster. But when circulation is stimulated through simple exercises, stretching, walking in nature, and even alternating hot and cold baths, the body rejuvenates. This was not superstition. It was practical advice that Cayce gave in countless readings. He said that the body is like an instrument, and if we do not tune it regularly, it goes out of harmony. Aging is simply the sound of an untuned instrument. Renewal, however, is possible when we bring balance back to every part of our being. Another forgotten key that Cayce highlighted was diet. He warned against excess processed foods, refined sugar, and heavy meats, long before modern nutritionists confirmed their negative effects. He recommended a diet based on fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and clean water. He explained that this type of food brings vitality because it works with the natural design of the body instead of forcing it. Cayce said that the body is like a temple, and what we put inside it becomes the material used to build our health. Many people think of food only as calories, but Cayce saw it as a form of energy that affects the body, the mind, and the soul. To rejuvenate, one must choose foods that give life, not those that steal it. And just as important as food was the attitude during meals, eating in peace, with gratitude, aware that nourishment comes from the Creator, made the difference between health and disease. Cayce also pointed to the power of the mind as the strongest factor in rejuvenation. He affirmed that the mind is the builder, meaning that what we think and believe is what we create in our bodies. A person who constantly repeats that they are old, tired, or sick unconsciously programs their cells to behave that way. But someone who cultivates thoughts of renewal, hope, and youth sends instructions of healing to their body. Cayce explained that suggestion and imagination are powerful tools, and that prayer and meditation are ways to align the subconscious with divine patterns. Through this alignment, the body receives strength beyond what medicine can measure. This does not mean denying the passage of time, but rather living in such harmony that time becomes less destructive. Cayce described individuals who, by following these principles, maintained youthful energy far beyond what was considered normal for their age. For him, the true forgotten practice to stop aging was not one single ritual, but the combination of mind, body, and spirit working together in unity. Modern culture has separated these areas, treating health only as a physical issue. Cayce, however, reminded us that we cannot separate what was created to function as one. If the spirit is neglected, the body suffers. If the mind is full of negativity, the organs weaken. But when all three are aligned with divine law, the body not only resists disease but also rejuvenates. He said that the Spirit of Christ within us is the ultimate source of renewal, and connecting with that spirit daily is the greatest antidote to aging. Cayce often reminded people that rejuvenation begins with daily choices. He was clear that there was no magic formula that would instantly turn back the clock. Instead, he explained that the body responds slowly, but surely to consistency. For example, he encouraged people to wake up early and begin the day with prayer or meditation, focusing the mind on divine principles before letting the worries of the world take over. This practice, according to him, sets the vibration for the entire day, allowing the body to operate in harmony rather than stress. He also recommended moments of stillness, even for just a few minutes, where a person could breathe deeply, visualize light circulating through their body, and consciously release tension. These practices may sound simple, but Cayce insisted that they had profound effects on the nervous system, blood pressure, and even cellular activity. By practicing them daily, people could experience not just peace of mind, but a physical sense of youthfulness. Another key point was forgiveness. Cayce taught that holding on to anger or resentment poisons the body. He often said that grudges are like toxins stored in the cells, and unless they are released, they continue to damage the body over time. He explained that forgiving others and forgiving oneself was not just a moral act, but a health practice. Many of his readings connected unresolved emotional conflicts to arthritis, ulcers, heart disease, and premature aging. He described forgiveness as a cleansing process that restores vitality, like removing dirt from a clogged river so the water can flow freely again. In this way, the act of letting go was actually one of the greatest rejuvenators available to us. It is not surprising that modern science is now confirming that stress and negative emotions accelerate aging at a cellular level, exactly as Cayce described decades earlier. Sleep was another vital element in Cayce's approach to rejuvenation. He stressed the importance of proper rest, but not just physical rest. He said that during sleep the body regenerates, and the spirit has the opportunity to realign with its divine source. For that reason, he recommended that people end their day with prayer or meditation, setting the mind on higher thoughts before falling asleep. He warned against going to bed angry or anxious, because the subconscious continues to work during the night, and negative states can disturb the process of renewal. Instead, filling the mind with gratitude, scripture, or affirmations of healing before sleeping would allow the body to restore itself more completely. According to Cayce, the way we prepare for sleep determines whether the night brings true rejuvenation or just physical exhaustion. He also connected the idea of rejuvenation to service. Cayce believed that helping others was not only a moral duty, but also a source of life energy. He explained that when we give love, compassion, and service to others, we open channels of divine energy that flow back into our own being. This spiritual law of giving and receiving, according to him, creates vitality and joy that keep the body young. In contrast, living selfishly, focused only on personal gain, closes those channels and leads to stagnation. He often reminded his followers that the happiest and healthiest people were those who gave freely of themselves, not those who tried to hoard their energy or possessions. Service, in his view, was a forgotten but powerful practice to extend not just the years of life, but the quality of those years. Edgar Cayce also linked rejuvenation with alignment to purpose. He said that people age faster when they live without meaning or direction. A life lived mechanically, only following routines without spiritual purpose, drains the soul. But when someone connects with their mission, whether it is raising a family with love, creating something that serves humanity, or simply living each day with integrity, the body responds with vitality. Cayce explained that purpose feeds the spirit, and the spirit energizes the body. He even suggested that one of the main reasons people experience midlife crises or sudden health declines is because they have lost connection with their deeper calling. Rejuvenation, therefore, is not only about physical habits, but also about remembering why we are here and choosing to live in alignment with that truth. Perhaps one of Cayce's most profound insights was that the Christ spirit within is the eternal source of youth. He said that when we awaken to the reality of God within us, we experience renewal that no external method can provide. In his words, the soul is ageless, and when we allow that truth to flow into our daily life, the body reflects it. This is why Cayce encouraged not just prayer, but communion with Christ as a living presence in the heart. For him, this was not a doctrine but a direct experience that could transform every aspect of life. When a person lives with that awareness, fear of aging diminishes, because they know they are connected to something eternal. Ironically, it is this very surrender to eternity that allows the body to remain strong in time. Casey's readings also pointed out the importance of balance in all areas of life. He emphasized moderation in eating, working, resting, and even thinking. Extremes, he said, break down the harmony of the body and accelerate aging. Too much work without rest exhausts the nervous system. Too much food without activity overloads the organs. Too much worry without faith paralyzes the mind. Balance, in his view, was a law of creation, and those who live in balance naturally align themselves with the rhythms of the universe. He often referred to the phrase, "in all things moderation," as a guideline for daily living. This balance, when practiced consistently, creates conditions where the body can renew itself instead of wearing down. Many of the people who followed his advice discovered that small adjustments in lifestyle led to profound changes in energy and appearance. One of the fascinating aspects of Casey's teachings is how he connected rejuvenation to the spine and nervous system. He explained that the spinal column is like a central highway of energy, and when it is misaligned or tense, the life force cannot circulate freely. This restriction creates weakness and premature aging in different parts of the body. For this reason, he often recommended osteopathic adjustments, massage, and gentle exercises to keep the spine flexible. He described the nerves as channels through which the creative forces flow, and if those channels are blocked, the result is disease or fatigue. In contrast, when the spine and nervous system are cared for, the entire body receives vitality. Modern science has since confirmed the link between spinal health, nerve function, and overall wellness, echoing Casey's guidance from decades earlier. Another essential part of his vision of renewal was breathing. Casey encouraged people to practice deep, conscious breathing, preferably in the fresh air and in connection with nature. He said that breath carries not only oxygen, but also life energy, which he sometimes referred to as the Spirit of God moving through the body. Shallow, anxious breathing, he warned, weakens the heart and creates tension in the nervous system. Deep breathing, combined with prayer or affirmations, strengthens the mind and calms the body. He believed that through proper breathing, we not only oxygenate the cells, but also receive spiritual energy that cleanses and restores us. Many of his readings described breathing exercises as part of the daily routine for those seeking vitality and longevity. Nature itself was also central in Casey's approach. He insisted that contact with the earth, the sun, and natural elements brings balance to the human body. He encouraged people to walk barefoot on the grass, to spend time in the sun moderately, and to live in harmony with the cycles of nature. He saw the body as a microcosm of creation, and when we disconnect from the natural world, we disrupt our own rhythms. In modern times where people live mostly indoors and surrounded by artificial environments, this teaching is more relevant than ever. Casey taught that reconnecting with nature is not simply refreshing, it is essential for keeping the body young. The forgotten practice of walking outside, breathing deeply, and appreciating creation was, for him, one of the most powerful ways to restore health and joy. Casey also warned about the dangers of fear. He explained that fear contracts the body, tightens the organs, and weakens the immune system. He observed that many illnesses and signs of premature aging are rooted in fear of the future, fear of loss, or fear of death. To overcome fear, he advised cultivating faith and trust in God's plan. He repeated many times that spirit is life, and that by affirming our connection to the divine, fear loses its grip. He recommended repeating affirmations such as, "God is my life," or "The Spirit within me renews me each day," as ways to reprogram the subconscious mind. This shift from fear to faith, he said, could restore not only peace of mind but also strength to the body. Fear ages us, but faith revives us. When we put all of these principles together, balance, spinal care, breathing, nature, forgiveness, service, prayer, and faith, we see the picture of what Casey meant by the forgotten practice to stop aging. It is not one hidden ritual, but a way of life that integrates mind, body, and spirit. Modern culture has forgotten these truths, distracted by technology, stress, and external solutions. Yet Casey's readings remind us that the key to rejuvenation is simple, accessible, and deeply spiritual. The challenge is not finding the practice, but remembering it and applying it with consistency. The body is a miracle of regeneration, but it reflects the choices of the soul. When we live in harmony with divine laws, time becomes less of a burden and more of a journey of continuous renewal. Cayce often highlighted that rejuvenation cannot be separated from gratitude. He explained that a grateful heart produces a vibration that influences every cell of the body. When we live in complaint, the body absorbs tension and ages faster. But when we live in thankfulness, even for the smallest things, we generate harmony that protects health. In several readings, he encouraged people to begin and end each day with expressions of gratitude, not as empty words, but as a conscious alignment with the source of life. Gratitude, he said, opens the channels for divine energy to flow freely. It is a forgotten spiritual exercise that transforms not only the mind, but also the very chemistry of the body. Modern studies now suggest that gratitude practices lower stress hormones and improve immunity, echoing Cayce's insights decades before. He also insisted that joy is medicine for the body. Cayce warned against living life with heaviness, even when facing difficulties. He explained that joy is not the absence of problems, but the conscious choice to trust in God while walking through them. He described joy as a spiritual force that renews the nervous system, relaxes the heart, and gives strength to the immune system. He said that laughter and playfulness were as important as diet and exercise. In his view, a childlike spirit brings youthfulness because it keeps the soul open to renewal. People who carried bitterness or constant seriousness, he warned, would see their bodies reflect that heaviness in wrinkles, fatigue, and illness. Joy, in contrast, keeps the face bright and the body strong, regardless of age. Cayce also spoke about the power of ideals in shaping health and longevity. He said that when a person lives with a clear ideal, especially one centered on Christ, their entire being organizes itself around that purpose. Ideals give direction to the mind and create stability in the emotions, which then support the health of the body. Without an ideal, people become vulnerable to confusion, stress, and disconnection, which accelerate aging. He encouraged each person to ask themselves, "What is my highest ideal?" and to measure daily actions against that standard. For Cayce, ideals were not abstract. They were living forces that shaped destiny. Aligning life with an ideal of service, love, and truth kept the soul alive, and when the soul is alive, the body follows. Another element of renewal in Cayce's teachings was simplicity. He warned that complexity and excess, too many possessions, too many distractions, too many conflicting desires, create a burden that drains energy. A simple life, focused on what truly matters, creates peace and balance. This simplicity allows more time for rest, prayer, connection with loved ones, and service. Cayce believed that simplicity brings clarity, and clarity strengthens vitality. Many of his recommendations were practical steps towards simplifying life: eating natural foods, maintaining regular routines, spending time in nature, and seeking quiet moments each day. In a world filled with noise and constant stimulation, this message is even more relevant. Simplicity is not deprivation, it is a forgotten key to preserving energy and youth. He also emphasized the importance of cooperation over competition. Cayce explained that when we live constantly comparing ourselves to others or fighting to prove our worth, we generate stress that harms the body. Cooperation, on the other hand, brings peace and unity. He said that we are created to work together, not against each other, and that living in harmony with others strengthens the flow of divine energy. This cooperative spirit, expressed in families, communities, and even nations, creates an atmosphere where health and renewal flourish. Competition may bring temporary success, but it often leaves behind exhaustion and emptiness. Cooperation brings lasting vitality because it aligns with divine law. In his vision, rejuvenation was inseparable from spiritual awakening. Cayce often reminded people that the soul does not age. The body is a temporary garment, but the soul is eternal. When we identify too much with the body, we fear aging and death. But when we identify with the soul, we live with freedom, and the body reflects that freedom. He said that those who live in constant awareness of their spiritual nature carry a lightness that shows in their health. They may still experience the passage of time, but they do not carry the same weight of decay as those who live disconnected from spirit. This is why he urged daily practices of prayer, meditation, and service, not only for salvation, but for vitality in the present life. Cayce frequently connected rejuvenation with love, not as a feeling alone, but as a force that transforms. He explained that when love flows through the heart, it brings healing to the entire body. Acts of kindness, compassion, and genuine care for others open the channels of life energy. He often said that love is the law of life, and when we resist it, we create blockages that manifest as disease and premature aging. He reminded people that love must begin within, with self-acceptance and forgiveness, because only then can it overflow toward others. According to Cayce, the absence of love creates dryness in the spirit and heaviness in the body, while the presence of love produces vitality that shines even in old age. Many who came to him with health struggles were told to practice love as a medicine, as real as any physical treatment. He also drew attention to the role of hope. Cayce said that hopelessness is one of the most destructive states for the body. When people lose hope, their systems begin to shut down, their posture weakens, and their cells reflect that despair. But when they hold on to hope, even in difficult times, the body finds reasons to fight, repair, and continue. He often pointed to the importance of affirmations that connect hope with divine presence, such as declaring that, "With God all things are possible." This was not about empty words, but about awakening the subconscious mind to possibilities greater than present limitations. Hope, he said, is a bridge that carries the soul through suffering and keeps the body alive with energy. Cayce also mentioned the creative power of imagination in maintaining youth. He said that imagination is not fantasy, but a tool of the soul. When used positively, it can inspire, heal, and build new realities in the mind that the body can follow. He encouraged people to visualize light flowing through their bodies, to see themselves walking with strength, and to imagine divine energy renewing their cells. This practice, he explained, helps reprogram the subconscious, which then instructs the body to regenerate. Modern science now recognizes visualization as a powerful therapeutic tool, but Cayce was teaching this long before such studies existed. He warned, however, that imagination used negatively, through constant worry and fear, could just as easily damage health and accelerate aging. In many readings, Cayce advised alternating periods of activity and rest. He believed the body functions best in rhythms, much like the seasons of the earth. Just as nature requires times of planting and times of harvest, the body requires times of exertion and times of renewal. People who push themselves constantly without resting, he explained, burn their energy reserves and age faster. But those who respect the natural cycles of their own bodies, alternating between work and rest, maintain vitality much longer. This principle extended to mental and emotional activity as well. Cayce recommended times of silence, away from constant stimulation, so the mind could heal and regain clarity. Respecting these rhythms was, in his view, part of the forgotten wisdom that humanity has ignored. Another striking element in Cayce's teachings was his emphasis on the power of prayer, not just as words, but as vibration. He explained that sincere prayer aligns our vibration with God's vibration, and this alignment affects the entire being. He described prayer as a channel that connects us with infinite energy, renewing both soul and body. He often encouraged people to pray not only for themselves, but also for others, because in giving energy through prayer, they would receive energy in return. This act of intercession, he said, creates currents of healing that benefit everyone involved. Prayer, in this sense, was more than a religious duty. It was one of the most powerful tools of rejuvenation available. Finally, Cayce often pointed to Christ as the living example of eternal youth. He said that Christ consciousness, living in awareness of God within, was the ultimate key to renewal. To Cayce, Christ was not only a historical figure, but also a spiritual reality that each person could awaken inside themselves. By following the example of Christ in love, service, and surrender, a person could access the same divine forces that bring life and renewal. He said that the more we live in alignment with Christ, the less we are dominated by time. This does not mean we escape aging completely, but it means that our lives radiate vitality and purpose until the very end. For Cayce, the forgotten practice to stop aging was, at its deepest level, the daily choice to live in the Spirit of Christ. Cayce's message about rejuvenation always returned to one essential truth: life is sacred, and when we honor that sacredness, the body responds with renewal. He believed that every action, thought and choice carries a vibration, and that vibration either builds health or tears it down. Many people seek shortcuts, he said, but the true path is discipline, patience, and faith. By practicing gratitude, forgiveness, balance, prayer, service, and healthy living, we create the conditions for the body to thrive. He never promised that time would stop completely, but he showed that the burden of aging can be lifted, that energy can be restored, and that life can be lived with dignity, vitality, and hope until the last breath. His teachings remind us that the human body is not a machine condemned to break down, but a temple designed to renew itself when guided by spirit. Cayce often used the image of light to describe renewal. He said that when we open ourselves to divine light through meditation and prayer, it enters every cell and restores order. Darkness, represented by fear, anger, and selfishness, causes confusion and weakness in the body. But light brings harmony and rejuvenation. This is why he encouraged people to visualize light, to fill their minds with the presence of God, and to carry that awareness into every part of their daily lives. For him, this was not symbolic, it was practical. People who lived with this consciousness often reported feeling lighter, younger, and more alive. It is the forgotten practice of letting divine light shine within us that holds the key to resisting the weight of time. He also taught that renewal is not just for personal benefit, but for the sake of others. A body filled with vitality can serve better, love more deeply, and inspire those around it. Cayce believed that each person has a responsibility to care for their health, not only for themselves, but because their life has meaning and impact on others. He said that when we neglect our bodies, we limit our ability to fulfill our purpose. But when we choose rejuvenation through spiritual practices, we extend our capacity to give, to create, and to serve. In this way, the pursuit of youth is not vanity, but a sacred duty when rooted in service to God and humanity. Perhaps the most challenging part of Cayce's message is that renewal is a choice. Every day we decide whether to live in harmony with divine laws or in opposition to them. He reminded us that habits shape destiny, and small daily actions accumulate into the state of our health and vitality. Choosing forgiveness over resentment, prayer over worry, service over selfishness, and gratitude over complaint may seem simple, but over years, they produce profound results. In this sense, the forgotten practice is less about learning something new and more about remembering what we already know but ignore. We were created with the ability to renew, and Cayce's readings invite us to awaken that gift within us. So when we ask whether it is possible to stop aging, Cayce's answer is both humble and profound. We cannot escape the passage of time, but we can escape its weight. We can live with strength, clarity, and vitality far beyond what the world expects. We can shine with a light that does not fade, because it is rooted in the eternal Spirit of God. The forgotten practice to stop aging is not hidden in a secret ritual. It is the daily choice to live in harmony with body, mind, and spirit, guided by love, faith, and service. This is the legacy of Edgar Cayce, a reminder that youth is not only measured in years, but in the quality of our connection to the divine. If this message has touched you and made you reflect on your own life, I invite you now to support this channel. Click like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can discover the forgotten wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And leave your comment below about what practice you believe could bring renewal to your own life. I will read and mark each one with a heart. Together we can build a community that lives with purpose, vitality, and faith, remembering that the spirit within us is always young. Edgar Cayce shocked many when he declared that fasting was not just about physical health, but about unlocking the very essence of the soul. What he revealed next would change everything people thought they knew about this ancient practice. Imagine hearing that skipping meals could open a channel between your mind and the divine, transforming not only your body, but your destiny. In one of his most striking sessions during the Great Depression, Cayce explained that fasting purified the physical temple so that the spiritual forces could flow without resistance. He described it as a sacred reset that aligned the body with the eternal laws of God. But here's what nobody expected. While people of his time were familiar with fasting as a religious tradition, they were unprepared for the way Cayce framed it as an active tool for spiritual evolution and healing. He wasn't speaking in vague metaphors, but giving detailed practical guidance. He revealed that true fasting was less about denial and more about redirection, shifting energy from the digestive system toward higher levels of consciousness, where the soul could hear God's voice more clearly. Cayce's readings went further, insisting that fasting was a way to strengthen the will and cleanse the mind from destructive patterns that often repeated across lifetimes. For him, this wasn't superstition but direct insight from the same universal intelligence he accessed in trance. He warned that the modern lifestyle, full of excess food and distraction, dulled spiritual sensitivity. When a person practiced fasting sincerely, they didn't just feel lighter in body, they felt closer to Jesus Christ, the ultimate model of discipline, surrender, and alignment with God. And then came the revelation that left audiences speechless. Cayce tied fasting directly to the life of Christ, reminding his listeners that Jesus often withdrew to fast and pray before major decisions, battles, or revelations. By echoing that practice, the seeker could tap into the same spiritual current. And here is what nobody expected. Cayce emphasized that fasting, done with humility and prayer, opened the subconscious channels where the soul could access guidance from the divine. One of the most powerful readings, documented in the archives of the ARE in Virginia Beach, described how a man struggling with deep depression and illness experienced transformation after applying Cayce's fasting instructions. During that session, Cayce explained that the physical body was overloaded with toxins, but more importantly, the man's spirit was weighed down by fear and guilt. Through a simple but disciplined fast, combined with daily prayer, the man felt not only restored in health but renewed in purpose. What stunned the attendees was how Cayce described the process. Fasting burned away not only physical impurities, but karmic residues, freeing the soul from chains it had carried across lifetimes. This revelation drew gasps because it connected something as simple as abstaining from food with the deepest mysteries of reincarnation and spiritual evolution. Cayce did not present fasting as punishment, but as liberation, a pathway that allowed the divine to flow without obstruction. The historical context made these revelations even more dramatic. During the harsh years of economic despair in the 1930s, when families across America struggled with hunger not by choice but by circumstance, Cayce's words redefined fasting. For the poor, fasting was suffering. For Cayce, when chosen deliberately and framed with spiritual purpose, fasting became a ladder to God. But there was a crucial distinction that changed everything. He differentiated between involuntary lack and conscious discipline, showing that intention was everything. A farmer from Kentucky, desperate for hope, once asked Cayce if his inability to feed his family meant that he was unconsciously closer to God. Cayce replied with compassion but clarity. True fasting requires willing surrender, not forced deprivation. The power comes not from hunger itself, but from the inner choice to direct the soul toward God's light. When Edgar Cayce spoke about fasting, he often warned that it was not a mechanical act. It was not about how many hours someone avoided food or how many days they could endure hunger. He made it clear that fasting without prayer, meditation, and conscious intention was simply starvation. The true spiritual power came when fasting was accompanied by a focus on Christ, on inner cleansing, and on redirecting the will. In one of his most impactful readings of 1932, Cayce explained that the body is a temple designed to reflect divine order, and when the digestive system rested, the spirit could move into the empty space with clarity. He said that just as spring cleaning renews a house, fasting renewed the human vessel for divine use. This idea shook the people present because it reframed fasting from an old religious ritual into a living technology for spiritual growth. He reminded them that when the body is heavy and clogged, the mind is sluggish, but when the body is clear, the soul can rise. Cayce often connected fasting with the concept of discipline, something he saw as critical for breaking cycles of weakness carried across lifetimes. He described how the act of voluntarily withholding food built inner strength that could then be applied to overcoming anger, lust, fear, or addictions. In his words, what is mastered in the body may be mastered in the soul. He described the fast not as denial but as training, like a soldier preparing for battle, except the battle was within. He pointed directly to the example of Jesus Christ, fasting in the wilderness before facing temptation. For Cayce, this was not symbolic but literal evidence that fasting strengthens the will against forces, seen and unseen, that seek to pull the soul away from God. When skeptics asked if this was just psychological, Cayce responded that psychology and spirit are intertwined, and that fasting allows the subconscious to realign with divine law. This was Cayce at his boldest, turning a simple act into a cosmic practice. One of the most dramatic moments happened during a session in Virginia Beach, when Cayce addressed a woman who had struggled with destructive habits for decades. Her body was failing, and her spirit was heavy. Cayce, in trance, prescribed not only a short fast, but also a spiritual practice during those days, reading the Gospel of John aloud, praying at sunrise, and using the fast as a period to forgive others and herself. Witnesses described how her entire presence changed after following these instructions. It was not simply that her health improved, it was her eyes, her voice, her very energy. She radiated peace. For those who doubted, this case became living evidence that fasting was not about the stomach, but about the soul's alignment with Christ. Cayce explained that during her fast, she opened herself to the healing power of divine love, and that was why transformation happened so quickly. The shock to the audience was not that she felt better, but that her whole life shifted in direction. Throughout his lifetime, Cayce often contrasted modern science with spiritual truth. Doctors of his time saw fasting as a medical curiosity at best, or a danger at worst. Cayce challenged that view, saying that science was still blind to the spiritual dimension of human existence. He never rejected medicine, but argued that the deeper cure always involved the soul. "Cleanse the body and you cleanse the channels of the spirit," he once said, highlighting that fasting was not against science but beyond it. He predicted that one day science would recognize how fasting triggers processes of renewal in both body and mind, and history would prove him right. Decades later, research on fasting began to confirm benefits Cayce had already described: detoxification, mental clarity, and healing responses. Yet Cayce's perspective reached further. He said fasting clears not only physical toxins, but also energetic residues that block the soul's connection to God. Edgar Cayce never separated fasting from the greater journey of the soul. He taught that the body, mind, and spirit are woven together in a single pattern, and fasting was one of the rare practices that touched all three at once. In one of his sessions that changed the life of an entire family, he explained that fasting helped dissolve barriers carried over from past incarnations. According to him, the weight we feel is not always just physical. It is the accumulation of choices, regrets, and attachments from many lifetimes. Fasting, when practiced with prayer and focus on Christ, could loosen these invisible chains. He described it as opening a window between the present life and the eternal self, allowing divine light to pour in. This startled the people listening because it suggested that something as ordinary as abstaining from food had cosmic consequences. It was not just about the body resting, but about the soul remembering its true origin in God. During the years of war, many turned to Cayce not only for medical guidance, but for comfort. Families in Virginia Beach and Hopkinsville asked how to keep faith when chaos seemed endless. Cayce reminded them that fasting, combined with prayer for others, was a way to anchor peace within while the world burned outside. He told them that Christ himself had taught this principle: when you fast, do it not with sadness but with a spirit turned to heaven, and God will reward you in secret. Casey emphasized that fasting became powerful when used for service, when someone fasted not only for personal clarity, but to lift others in prayer. In this way, he connected individual discipline with community healing. One soldier's mother reported that during her fast and prayers, she felt an overwhelming presence of peace, even as her son was far across the ocean. Casey explained that fasting had opened her channel to receive the assurance of the Spirit, giving her strength to endure. Another striking theme in Casey's teachings was his warning against approaching fasting mechanically, as if it were magic. He said that many people failed because they treated fasting as a test of willpower rather than an offering of surrender. The goal was never endurance, but alignment. He insisted that without humility, fasting could even increase pride, making a person think themselves holier than others. To prevent this, Casey recommended simple, structured practices. Begin with prayer, choose a short fast rather than extremes, and always end it with gratitude and moderation. He described fasting as a conversation between the body and God, where each hunger pang was a reminder to redirect thought toward Christ. Instead of fighting hunger with bitterness, the seeker was to use it as a call to prayer, a moment to lift the mind above the body. In this way, fasting became not deprivation, but constant communion. Casey also addressed the fear many had about the physical risks of fasting. Doctors in the 1930s and 40s warned against it, claiming it weakened the body dangerously. Casey disagreed, clarifying that short, purposeful fasts were not only safe, but healing. He often recommended simple methods, fruit juices, water, sometimes a day or two of complete abstinence, depending on the individual's condition. What mattered most was the spiritual frame behind it. In one reading preserved in the archives, he explained that the body uses fasting as a time of repair, cleansing tissues and resetting natural rhythms. But he stressed again, without prayer, the fast remains only physical. With prayer, it becomes sacred. He often repeated that the highest purpose of fasting was to prepare the body as a clear vessel so that the soul could receive divine impressions. Make the body a fit channel for the Spirit, he said, a phrase that many who heard him never forgot. Casey's understanding of fasting was rooted in the belief that the human body is more than flesh and blood. It is a living temple designed to channel divine energy. He often reminded seekers that if the body is clogged with impurities and the mind is filled with worry, the spirit cannot express itself freely. Fasting then was like sweeping the floors of a sacred sanctuary, removing what blocked the presence of God. In one reading that left the audience stunned, he described fasting as loosening the cords of bondage, not only freeing the body from poisons, but also releasing the heart from resentment and the mind from confusion. He urged people not to see fasting as punishment, but as preparation. Just as a musician tunes an instrument before a performance, fasting tuned the body for the soul's music. This comparison made the teaching practical and unforgettable because it gave people a new way to imagine the sacredness of their physical vessel. Perhaps the most shocking claim Casey made was that fasting could affect not only the present life, but the soul's journey after death. He explained that when we leave this world, we carry the state of our consciousness with us. If the mind is clouded by greed, fear, or attachment, the transition can be heavy and confusing. But when a person has practiced fasting with prayer, they train themselves to detach from what is temporary and cling to what is eternal. He said, fasting was rehearsal for dying well, an exercise in letting go of the physical so that the spirit could rise freely. This revelation left many silent because it tied a simple earthly discipline to the ultimate destiny of the soul. According to Casey, those who learned to fast with humility and devotion were better prepared to walk into eternity with clarity and peace closer to Christ. There was also a communal side to his teaching. Casey encouraged groups to fast together, not for show but for shared strength. He believed that when several people fasted with one heart and one prayer, the spiritual energy multiplied. During the years of the Great Depression, some groups in Virginia Beach gathered not only to study the Bible, but to practice short fasts while praying for their neighbors who were unemployed, sick, or hopeless. The testimonies that came from these gatherings were powerful. People spoke of renewed courage, of unexpected opportunities, and of a deep sense of being held by God's presence. Casey explained that collective fasting created a channel through which spiritual power could flow into a community, lifting burdens that no one person could carry alone. He connected this practice to the early Christians, who often combined fasting with prayer when seeking guidance or facing persecution. One element that consistently set Casey apart was his insistence on balance. He never promoted extreme fasting or self-destruction. Instead, he stressed moderation, reminding people that the body is a gift from God and must be cared for. He often advised seekers to listen to their own constitution, to fast lightly but intentionally, and to return to nourishing foods with gratitude. For him, the fast was never about how long someone could endure without food, but about how much the soul could open to divine truth during that time. He also gave practical advice, resting during a fast, avoiding unnecessary labor, and spending more time in meditation or scripture reading. These details showed that Casey did not treat fasting as a vague idea, but as a concrete practice, grounded in daily life. What made his guidance extraordinary was that it always pointed beyond the physical to the eternal, turning every detail into an opportunity to align with Christ. During one particularly moving session, Casey was asked whether fasting could truly heal deep illnesses, or if it was only symbolic. His answer was both practical and spiritual. He explained that the body has natural powers of regeneration that awaken when the digestive system rests, and that this physical cleansing allowed the nervous system and glands to reset. But he insisted the deeper healing came from the soul's realignment during the fast. He recounted how individuals who fasted while meditating on the life of Christ often experienced not only relief from physical pain, but breakthroughs in long-standing emotional wounds. To Casey, disease was never only in the body. It was in the mind, the attitudes, the spirit. Fasting simply opened the door so that God's healing could flow without resistance. One unforgettable example preserved in the ARE archives described a man who had battled alcoholism for years. Nothing seemed to break the cycle until Casey recommended a 3-day fruit juice fast, combined with daily prayers of surrender to Christ. The man later testified that for the first time in decades he felt his cravings weaken. He described it as if a fog had lifted from his mind, allowing him to see his life clearly. Casey explained that the fast had helped cleanse not only the physical body, but also the subconscious patterns tied to guilt and self-destruction. For him, fasting was not magic, but cooperation with divine law. When the body is cleared, the spirit can move more freely. Witnesses saw this case as proof that fasting could reach into places medicine could not touch, liberating the soul from invisible chains. Casey warned, however, that the real victory came not from the fast alone, but from continuing a life of prayer and service after it ended. Casey often compared fasting to tuning a radio. He explained that the human mind constantly receives impressions, but when cluttered with excess, the signal becomes static. Fasting, he said, cleared the static so the soul could receive God's broadcast. The analogy struck people deeply, especially in an era when radios were the center of every home. Just as families tuned into clear frequencies, Casey explained, the soul needed to tune into divine truth. Hunger pangs became reminders to shift focus away from fear and back toward Christ. He even described fasting as one of the simplest tools for aligning with the Akashic records, the universal memory of the soul, because it quieted the body long enough for the deeper self to speak. This teaching transformed the way many viewed their daily struggles, giving them hope that their discipline could open doors to wisdom and healing far beyond their imagination. What shocked skeptics most was Casey's claim that fasting could directly impact one's spiritual vision. He said that many people live blinded by material desires, unable to sense the presence of God all around them. Through fasting, however, the veil thins, and the soul perceives what is usually hidden. People reported vivid dreams, sudden insights, even a sense of spiritual companionship during fasts. Casey explained that this was natural. When the physical body quiets, the spiritual body awakens. He reminded his audiences that Christ himself said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." For Casey, this was not poetic language, but literal truth. Fasting created the hunger, prayer created the thirst, and God himself filled the soul. This message electrified those who heard it because it tied the act of fasting directly to the promise of divine encounter. Cayce also addressed a subtle but crucial truth. Fasting without love was empty. He warned that some seekers approached fasting as a competition, as if God would reward the longest endurance. He dismantled that idea completely, saying the power of fasting is measured not in hours or days, but in the sincerity of the heart. He told a group in Hopkinsville that the real test was not how long one could go without food, but whether the fast inspired greater compassion, forgiveness, and service to others. If someone fasted but returned to anger, pride, or selfishness, they had missed the purpose. In his words, "Let the fast be not of bread alone, but of bitterness, of hatred, of judgment." That statement stunned the room because it elevated fasting into a total cleansing of body, mind, and heart. He explained that the greatest fast was not measured on a clock, but in the soul's willingness to release what kept it far from God. In another remarkable session during the Second World War, Cayce spoke to families burdened with fear for their sons and daughters overseas. Many asked if fasting could somehow protect their loved ones. Cayce did not promise miracles, but he did affirm that fasting with prayer created a channel of strength that could reach across oceans. He urged mothers and fathers to fast not out of despair, but out of faith, turning every pang of hunger into an intercession for their children. Testimonies later recorded showed that many found supernatural peace in the midst of their fasting, even when news from the front was grim. Some described dreams of their loved ones surrounded by light, which gave them courage to endure. Cayce explained that fasting heightened spiritual sensitivity, allowing people to sense realities beyond the physical world. What shocked many was his claim that such practices could indeed influence unseen forces, creating ripples that touched lives far away. One of Cayce's most consistent messages was that fasting must always end with gratitude. He taught that when breaking a fast, one should not rush to overindulge but pause to thank God for every bite, recognizing food as sacred provision. He often suggested beginning again with simple fruits or broths, allowing the body to gently return to its rhythm. This closing act of humility sealed the spiritual benefits of the fast. He also encouraged people to journal during their fasting periods, recording insights, dreams, and reflections as a way to anchor the lessons learned. Many followers reported that their greatest breakthroughs did not happen during the fast itself, but in the quiet days after, when clarity emerged like dawn after a long night. Cayce explained that fasting was like planting seeds, and the harvest often came later. This teaching gave people patience and trust, showing them that transformation unfolds in God's timing, not in human schedules. What made Cayce's view of fasting so radical was the way he linked it to the life of Christ at every step. He insisted that fasting was not just an ancient tradition or a personal discipline, it was the very path Jesus walked to prepare for his mission. Cayce said that when Christ fasted in the wilderness, he was demonstrating the power of surrender, showing humanity that divine strength comes when the body decreases and the spirit increases. For Cayce, every fast was a way of imitating Christ, drawing closer to his example. He reminded his listeners that Jesus said, "When you fast, not if you fast," making it clear that fasting was expected in the spiritual journey. By tying his guidance so directly to the teachings of Jesus, Cayce gave fasting an authority that even skeptics found hard to dismiss. He positioned it as a bridge between the earthly and the eternal, a sacred discipline that aligned the soul with the Son of God. Cayce frequently reminded seekers that fasting was not meant to isolate them from the world, but to prepare them to serve it better. He said that after a fast, the true measure of its success was not mystical visions or temporary clarity, but whether the individual returned to life with greater patience, compassion, and courage. He told one group in Virginia Beach that a fast should make a person easier to live with, not harder. If someone became irritable or boastful because of their fast, then they had failed to understand its meaning. This teaching was striking because it shifted the focus from personal achievement to relational transformation. Fasting was a tool to clear away selfishness so the soul could reflect Christ more fully in daily interactions, at work, at home, and in the community. To Cayce, every spiritual practice had to flow outward into love, otherwise it lost its divine purpose. In the 1940s, When America was still recovering from the Depression and entering the turbulence of war, Casey's words carried even more weight. People were desperate for practical ways to strengthen their inner lives. He explained that fasting was not about escape, but about preparation for endurance. He described how those who practiced fasting with prayer could stand stronger in times of crisis, because they had trained themselves to depend not on the comfort of food, but on the presence of God. This resilience, he said, was exactly what Christ demonstrated in the wilderness. In one documented session, Casey told a weary factory worker that a single day of fasting and prayer each week would give him more strength than endless worry or overwork. The man later reported feeling renewed and focused, even during 12-hour shifts. Such stories spread quickly, convincing many that fasting was not a luxury for saints, but a discipline for ordinary people in extraordinary times. Casey also warned about the misuse of fasting for selfish ends. He cautioned that some people approached fasting as a way to demand blessings from God, almost as if it were a bargaining tool. He condemned this mindset, saying fasting is never to manipulate God but to transform oneself. He told seekers that if they fasted while secretly hoping to force an outcome, a promotion, wealth, revenge, they were only starving their bodies while feeding their egos. True fasting, he said, always carried the spirit of surrender, trusting God's will rather than trying to control it. He reminded them that Jesus fasted not to change God, but to align himself with the Father's plan. This distinction became one of the pillars of Casey's teaching. Fasting is about letting go, not grasping, about opening the hands, not tightening them. When practiced with this humility, fasting became a channel for grace rather than a tool of pride. One of Casey's most memorable phrases about fasting was, "Let the body rest, that the soul may rise." This simple line captured his entire perspective. He taught that the body, when overfed or overstimulated, weighs the spirit down like heavy chains. By giving the body pause, the soul naturally lifted, like a balloon freed from a stone. Many who heard this imagery never forgot it, and it inspired countless people to approach fasting not with fear but with hope. In practice, it meant that even a short fast, skipping a single meal with prayerful intention, could create a moment of spiritual clarity. Casey emphasized that small, consistent acts were more powerful than extreme gestures done once. This teaching made fasting accessible to everyone, whether rich or poor, young or old, strong or weak. It was not the size of the sacrifice, but the sincerity of the heart that unlocked the power. And in this, Casey echoed the very heart of Christ's gospel. For Edgar Cayce, fasting was also a way to confront hidden fears. He often explained that when people feel hunger, what rises to the surface is not only physical discomfort, but also the inner restlessness they usually cover with distractions. He said that during fasting, memories, doubts, and even suppressed guilt often come up. Instead of fearing this process, Cayce urged seekers to embrace it as a cleansing of the soul. He compared it to stirring the bottom of a muddy river. The water becomes clouded at first, but as the silt rises and clears away, the current runs pure again. Many people reported that during fasts, they had dreams or inner impressions that revealed unresolved conflicts or emotions. Cayce taught that this was not a sign of failure, but evidence that fasting was working, because it was pulling hidden burdens into the light where God could heal them. He often tied this inner purification to the example of Christ in the wilderness. Cayce said that when Jesus fasted, he faced not only physical hunger, but the full weight of temptation, fear, and doubt. That confrontation was necessary for his mission. Likewise, when ordinary people fasted, they too would face their own shadows. Cayce emphasized that the point was not to defeat these struggles by willpower alone, but to surrender them to God. He explained that every moment of hunger was an opportunity to pray, "Not my will, but yours be done." In this way, fasting became training for life's greatest challenges. By learning to release control in small acts of fasting, a person built the capacity to release control in larger trials. This perspective gave people courage, showing them that fasting was not weakness, but preparation for spiritual battle. Another striking teaching Cayce offered was that fasting could sharpen spiritual perception in dreams. He explained that when the body rests from heavy digestion, the subconscious becomes more active and receptive. Many who fasted reported unusually vivid dreams, some with symbolic messages and others with startling clarity. Cayce encouraged people to record these dreams because he believed they often contained guidance from the soul or even from divine sources. In one session, he described how a seeker had received a dream during a fast that revealed the root cause of her illness, unforgiveness toward a family member. When she reconciled, her health improved dramatically. Cayce used this case to illustrate that fasting opens channels for the soul to communicate truth that the conscious mind ignores. He warned, however, that discernment was key. Not every dream was divine, but fasting increased the chances of hearing the still, small voice of God. Cayce often reminded people that fasting was not a practice to be feared, but embraced as a gift. He told seekers that fear of hunger was actually fear of losing control, and that surrendering this fear was at the heart of spiritual growth. He explained that when a person deliberately chooses to go without food for a time, they step into a place of trust that God will sustain them in ways beyond the physical. He gave the example of how, during the Great Depression, many families lived with involuntary hunger, but those who reframed even their suffering as a period of prayer and dedication to God found unexpected strength. Cayce never minimized the pain of lack, but he said intention transformed experience. He contrasted bitterness with surrender, saying one led to despair, the other to spiritual power. For him, the key difference was whether the soul used hunger to complain or to connect with the eternal. That choice determined whether fasting became torment or transformation. In one of his sessions that people never forgot, Cayce explained that fasting had the ability to retune the soul to its original harmony. He used the image of a harp whose strings had grown loose over years of neglect. The instrument still existed, but it had lost its ability to produce beautiful music. Fasting, he said, was like tightening those strings, restoring resonance with divine law. This metaphor touched many because it made the invisible visible. People could suddenly understand their own spiritual disharmony as something real, and fasting as the tool to restore it. He insisted that even short, simple fasts, when combined with scripture and prayer, could bring profound alignment. He pointed again to Christ, who lived in perfect harmony with God, and showed that fasting was part of his way of maintaining that connection. For Cayce, to fast was to imitate Christ and to slowly restore the lost music of the soul. Cayce also emphasized that fasting was not about abandoning the world, but about returning to it renewed. He told audiences in Virginia Beach that a fast which did not make someone more loving afterward was wasted. The true test, he said, was what happened when the fast ended. How one spoke to family, how one treated co-workers, how one faced temptations. He described fasting as sharpening a sword. The blade is tested not in the fire, but in the battle afterward. In the same way, fasting was preparation, and its fruits appeared in daily life. This teaching corrected those who thought of fasting as an escape or as an act of superiority. Cayce reminded them that Christ fasted not to withdraw permanently, but to prepare for his mission. Every seeker, Cayce taught, should view fasting as training for service, not withdrawal from responsibility. That perspective gave the practice not only spiritual but ethical weight, grounding it in real-world impact. Finally, Cayce always brought fasting back to the central figure of faith, Jesus Christ. He taught that fasting without Christ was like a lamp without oil. It had form, but no light. He urged seekers never to approach fasting as an isolated technique or a mystical shortcut. Instead, it had to be grounded in prayer, scripture, and the imitation of Christ's humility. He said that Jesus's fasts were not acts of self-denial for their own sake, but acts of preparation for service. Every true fast, Cayce insisted, should end with renewed commitment to serve others and glorify God. He described fasting as a cycle: cleansing, revelation, surrender, and service. By walking through that cycle, the soul not only grew stronger, but also became a vessel of healing for others. In closing, Cayce left a legacy that still echoes today. His readings on fasting were not exotic curiosities. They were profound reminders that the human soul is designed for communion with God. He showed that fasting cleanses not just the body but the mind and heart, breaking chains from the past and opening channels to the eternal. He insisted that without Christ at the center, fasting was empty, but with Christ it became a living sacrament. His words challenged science, comforted the suffering, and inspired countless people to see fasting not as deprivation, but as liberation. For him, the true spiritual power of fasting lay in its ability to strip away illusions and return the soul to its source. And perhaps his most enduring lesson was simple yet eternal. Fast not to escape the world, but to prepare yourself to love it as Christ loved it. With that, Cayce transformed fasting from an ancient ritual into a living path of renewal for every soul willing to walk it.